Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Hello, welcome to another episode of Harvesting Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. Today I am with Jay Famiglietti.
Excellent.
Did I get that right?
You
Okay. And is it Dr. Jay Famiglietti?
It's Dr.
Okay.
You don't have to call me Dr. Jay, though.
You paid the price to get there. I need to call you.
No.
So,
Just call me Jay.
Okay. Welcome and thanks for coming and being
Pleasure.
on this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I love the stuff that you're working on, so I'm going to have lots and lots of questions. But first, tell me about your story and how did you get to where you are now? Oh, by the way, you are a professor at ASU right now.
Yes, that's
Okay.
right. I'm a hydrologist. That means I study water and how it moves over and through the land surface, and even look at the global water cycle. So the trade-offs between what's happening on land and in the ocean and the atmosphere. You know, I got interested in the environment as a kid. I was raised in the 60s, and that was sort of the beginning of the environmental movement. It really resonated with me. And as a teenager, when I was in high school and even in Boy Scouts, we needed to do service projects. And back then, so many of those service projects were, cleaning up the beaches. I was raised in Rhode Island, cleaning up the rivers, which were so polluted, and the groundwater was so contaminated that, I decided at some point this is what I want to do in college, and so majored in geology, and then began to focus on water.
Wow. Okay. So you started in Rhode Island.
I did.
And that we know that whole East Coast was a big part of, that was the U.S. at one point, right?
Yeah.
But it was also the first locations for industrial
Yeah.
revolution worldwide, really. I grew up in
That's
Buffalo, not too bad. And I would spend the summers in New England and Rhode Island, one of the places we'd go as well. But I'm the same thing. I grew up in that time period, of Silent Spring and some other things that had come out, Walden's Pond, the whole bit. But it was still really, I think the awakening probably happened more after the EPA started with Nixon in the 70s. It really became obvious as I got older. You wouldn't want to swim in Lake Erie. It was like, it literally looked like it was from a different planet. It had like a radiation color of some sort that would come off of it, and fish were kind of dead, and it smelled too. You could go to places that smelled. And so I saw different things like some biological fixes, like they put mussels in, unintended consequences, but they did clean up, and the big part was industry left. It went someplace else in the world. So we know pollution never ended, but it didn't, it's slowed down where we are. But so you started in Rhode Island. Where did you go to college?
I went to college in Boston, Tufts University, majored in
Tufts,
geology, and then actually did my master's degree out here in Arizona at the University of Arizona, and then back to the East Coast. Missed the East Coast, and went to Princeton for my PhD, and met my wife there, and then we kind of started our professional journey together, and have mainly been out west professionally since I was a postdoc, and then faculty positions in Texas, California, was up in Canada for a while, and then now here at ASU.
So did you work in
2023.
industry part of that time, or was you always
No,
academic?
the closest I have come to industry was I worked for NASA for 4 years, the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. And that particular NASA facility is actually like an aerospace engineering company. They build satellites. And of course they do the Mars rovers and stuff like that. So it was a cool place to
And
work.
why did they look at hydrology? Were they expecting water on the moon or in
Well, that's
someplace?
one thing that we're still looking for, but no, NASA being the space agency launches a lot of satellites, and a lot of those satellites are pointed back,
monitoring, yeah.
looking at the Earth and looking at vegetation, looking at water, looking at temperature, and all kinds of things.
So you have been with ASU now for a short bit, a year or two.
Yep.
And what are you doing specifically there now? Are you still teaching, or you do research papers, or both, or
I do.
how does that work?
I do both. I would say my mission is primarily research. Although I'm about to this spring term, so January 2026, I'm teaching a new course, Introductory Sustainability, and I think there's going to be somewhere around 300 students in it.
Whoa.
So I'm a little scared.
You haven't done that before?
I have not.
Really?
Well,
In your whole career?
No, I have done it before, but it's been a long time.
Okay.
It's been over 10 years, and probably since I've really been in the classroom for, I teach seminars, small seminars to graduate students, but it's been a long time since I've taught a class, a big introductory class, and even longer since I've taught a class that was over 200 kids.
And those introductory classes are
intimidating.
great if they're done right. So you got a lot of pressure on you.
That's
But students are, I think, different now. I don't know per se, but it'll be an interesting
it's
way.
interesting. I mean, last time I taught a big class, no one was really, people were just starting to take their laptops to class, and it was never clear to me whether they were goofing off or taking notes.
Well, now they have cell phones.
And now they've got
Are
phones.
those allowed at ASU?
I haven't been in a big classroom in a while, so I'll let you know in January. But I'll be honest, I'm intimidated.
And how much leeway do you have? To me, I'd be excited with that, because so how much leeway do you have to design the class?
I'd say
curriculum are you
not a
given?
ton. There's especially in a big class like that. My experience is that I used to teach big geology classes and environmental science classes, and I find that the closer you stay to the textbook, have everything, whether it's a textbook or whatever your set of reading materials are or core materials. The closer you stay to that, the more comfortable the students are. So you can, embellish that and make it really entertaining. But yeah, so not a ton of leeway, but I'm starting to see the clock is ticking. I feel like I really, if it's going to start up in January,
Okay.
I need to get on it like now.
Yeah,
in fact, I
yeah,
need to
yeah,
leave
yeah.
and go
This
work on
afternoon.
my class.
And the more you think about it. Okay, so with what you've researched and what you've done, right? So I may think in terms of water. So the building block of life in water is we have microbes on the land, right? And in water we have plankton and zooplankton. Is that pretty much the building blocks, right?
Yeah.
So how are they affected in today's world of high pollutants?
Yeah.
Global change. So we
Yep.
have salinity issues. We
Yes,
have
we do.
heat issues, and that's just we haven't even talked about rivers or lakes.
Right.
How many rivers or lakes do we still have that you could ever drink out of, even after you
That's
process
an excellent
them?
question. I have a colleague so I've been focusing on groundwater these days, so the water below the ground in our aquifers. And I have a colleague who's been at it a couple more decades than I have. Really esteemed guy named John Cherry, and he will tell you this is a godfather of groundwater contamination, and he will tell you there's no place you can go where
Without
the groundwater.
finding,
Where the groundwater is clean, so it's all contaminated, and that's just the impact of our activities. So let me just tell you a little bit about some of the work that I do, because we don't get that many opportunities to talk. So I use satellites and develop computer models to track how freshwater availability is changing around the world. And we can look at regions like Arizona, or we can look at the United States, or we can look globally. And the picture that emerges is one that is showing that the continents are drying and the ice is melting and the permafrost is thawing. And so we have shrinking freshwater availability on land. We've got degradation, a drying of the continents. And then where does that water go? It ends up in the ocean. So it's contributing to increasing rates of sea level rise.
Right.
So that's the kind of stuff that I work on. And these days, I'm also very interested in getting to the action part of my career. So trying to make
Good.
sure our state agencies and federal agencies know what I'm seeing and use some of the tools that we develop, and also globally too, like trying to bring these conversations to the COP climate change meetings and it's difficult. It's quite a challenge.
So let's stay on a general path before I start walking you through maybe Arizona.
Yeah, sure.
In Arizona, we can talk specifically about what's happening here, and this is it's very similar to the worldwide. When I travel, there's some places like in Asia that are completely polluted now to the point where the water has almost got no purpose anymore. But before we get to that, let's talk from a worldwide standpoint. Why do we even need the oceans? Nobody lives in the ocean, right? So what's the purpose? Walk us through that.
Most of the water on the planet is in the ocean, it's the water planet, and of course we get a tremendous amount of resources and food from the ocean. So it's all good, but importantly, it's part of the water cycle. And so, just think back to when you were in elementary school. The diagrams, the way you would learn about the water cycle is that there'd be rain on land and there'd be runoff, and then the water would run off to the oceans and then evaporate, and then rain out back on the land. And so, that's how the Earth works. Water is one of the main cycles, along with the carbon cycle and energy, and won't get too into it. But
that's a full of basic things.
Yes, and water and the water cycle. Look, if we don't have a water cycle, we're not cooling off the planet. The planet would just overheat. So the water cycle serves a lot of purposes. It's more than just providing water for humans. It actually helps keep the planet cool.
So we're 70% water, if we look at it from that standpoint, right?
Yeah.
But another interesting concept is the concept of cyanobacteria or blue-green algae.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the impact of that? What is that? Because now we also have, talk about algae blooms versus cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria is what, 28% of the oxygen is produced through that, I think, in different water bodies.
I think so. I mean, just focusing on the algae and some of the algal blooms, it's just become a huge problem. The Great Lakes region is really plagued by it. It's really, really difficult to manage. Agricultural runoff has a huge impact on that. And so that, that balance of the need to grow food for this, huge population we have in the United States and globally, but to protect the environment, there's always that tension there. There's a lot of room for improvement. And I just think sometimes people lose sight of, it's very easy to sit here and say, farmers should do this, farmers should do that. And it's a challenge to grow food. It's a challenge to grow food.
Well, we have a system that is based on a commodity,
yeah.
and 1 or 2 pennies per acre is a big deal.
It is, right? And so making the changes that, on the one hand, it's not rocket science to think about how to do some of these things in a cleaner way, in a more efficient way, but it costs the farmers money, and we need to recognize that. We need to incentivize that.
There's no safety net for them.
There's no safety net, and so sometimes I think the financial innovations are not there to help, right? Getting back to the algae and the contamination, I don't think the financial incentives are there to help the farmers do the things that they need to do, and in many cases want to do, but can't do it because it's too expensive.
So I went down to the Caribbean, and I was on a flight that brought me back to Miami before I got back here. There's a brown streak that goes, I don't know how many, 400 miles from whatever island I was at or whatever, that went all the way back up to Florida, and that, from what I understand, even goes further. And that was, I was told, was an algae bloom.
Oh, wow.
Right?
I haven't heard about that. But
oh,
that
my God. And I literally saw it, and it was literally like this big brown streak.
I haven't heard about that. I thought you were going to talk about how it was a sort of like an ocean patch, or like a stream of, it was a garbage patch or something.
Well, that was another question I had for you. Is these? I've heard about garbage patches, which is a lot of plastic water bottles is the part, because it makes it float. Maybe that's not 100% bad, but at least you can see it. But the size of Texas, there's 4 or 5 of them
There's
out
huge.
there.
That's right. And so that is sort of related to the circulation of the ocean. So there are currents in the ocean, And just like there's, say large gyres or circular currents, that means that there's slow moving parts in the middle. And in those slow moving parts, then that's where the plastic and the garbage accumulates. And so, yeah, these things are huge. And, getting back to the fact that there's no clean water anywhere, no clean groundwater anywhere. There's also very few places you can go. You could go up to Greenland, you could go up to the North Pole and find, microplastics and coal dust, right? And so we've had a huge impact on this.
And I've read, and again, the answer better, but I've read about these microplastics, and some of them come off of our shirts when we have a plastic shirt or we don't wear plastic shirts, but most of our clothing.
I have a closet full of plastic shirts. And,
okay. So every time you wash them, like 1,000 microfibers come off.
Yep.
They go in the ocean, and fish or crustaceans read them as being plankton or zooplankton. They think they're part of the building block, so they eat it, and then ultimately we eat that.
We eat them.
We're literally eating our own shirts.
That's true. And so that, one of the takeaways I want to share with you is that we need to work with the fashion industry. Okay. And so to help them institute processes, right, or choose materials that minimize the microplastics, or have processes that don't end up with this stuff being discharged into the ocean.
I think one of the issues I see when I go to Africa is that we're way below the poverty line in a lot of places, right? And clothing is manufactured in bulk. When it is, it's that plastic, it's the microfiber, it's the whatever you want to call it. And because it's so cheap, it's a way for them to buy clothing. And it's put out any kind of a clothing industry, and a lot of countries don't have a clothing industry anymore. They don't have any natural fibers. So it's a problem. Again, the problem is with people, not really with the environment. It's how we built our system. And the question is how do you change that? You don't want to charge more for people to wear clothing, right? But at the same time, how do you have a social intervention that changes that?
Yeah, I think there's a role for the fashion industry there. I really do. I mean, I think with a lot of things related to water, industry uses most of the water, the agricultural industry, but we're talking about apparel, which is also intensive water use sector. Without that industry leadership, without efforts to improve the processes and even to help the developing world, it's going to be really, really hard to make progress. So one of the things that I've been doing for a while is really calling out or calling for call to action. We need industry stewards, and the apparel industry is huge in that regard.
We have to have public policy too that goes along with it.
Yes, right? We do. Yep. And understanding the complexities, back to the water cycle and how it impacts the things that we've been talking about, how it impacts climate, how it impacts water availability, how it impacts contamination, and the food that we eat, and the clothes that we wear, and the energy that we consume in our daily lives. It's hard to keep track of it all.
Right.
It really is. And I'm at the point in my career where I've stopped thinking about trying to change the world and more focused on trying to change one little thing.
Yeah.
And so if you can work with one apparel company, or if you can work with one, state government, or if you can impact one international organization, even just a little bit, I've started to really appreciate that's actually a significant impact.
I'm going to stay global for about a minute more.
Sure.
I got a couple of quick things. I was down in Jamaica like a year ago, I think, and I did a glass bottom boat, and I'm over the coral reef. and the reef is pretty much gone where I was. It was bleached out. And I know, explain to us what that bleaching effect is, number one. But here's the interesting thing. I'm on the boat with some young kids in their 20s, maybe, and they're the tour guides taking us, showing us things and staghorns and all the things that are kind of gone. And I said, God, how long have you guys been doing it? Oh, 5 or 6 years. I said, well, have you seen a change in that time period? They said, oh, yeah. In 5 years, it's gone from being alive to being pretty much dead in that short a period of time. So what's the bleaching effect all about? That has to do with the salinity of the water, from what I understand, right? How does that affect?
Well, it's really the absorption of carbon dioxide. And so through some of the chemical processes in the ocean, that absorption of carbon dioxide leads to the production of acid, the acidification of the oceans. And so the acid is basically just dissolving. The coral reefs are, they're carbonates. They're, basically, limestones, calcium carbonate, and acid dissolves that. And so that's what's happening.
So I've read about some of these geotechnical issues where they talk, or solutions, where they talk about seeding that and bringing the alkalinity back and actually starting to grow these farms of coral, man-made farms of coral that they can put out into the ocean. Have you looked at any of that? Do you think we're at that point yet where we have to choose something like that, or do we have any way to stop what's happening or to neutralize it? What do you think?
I think it's going to be a little bit of everything. So I think it's whatever we can do to minimize the impacts we're having on climate will be extremely helpful. But at the same time, we kind of need a portfolio approach. So it could be,
I agree,
right? And even with respect to water, when we think about water in a region, in a developing country, it could be that we need to develop more groundwater. It could be that we need to develop more conservation. It could be that we need to do more efficient irrigation. It could be that we need to make loans to farmers. It's really all of those things in the package. Depends on where you are.
Which is harder to organize, but it is probably the solution. Two last things, Global. I was in Cape Town, I think, a few months ago, and Cape Town has gone to desalination, right? So literally the only large-scale project I've seen that I'm aware of where the town of Cape Town, a big city, is now taking the water out of the ocean and desalinizing it. So I want to ask you about that. I'm going to ask you two questions at once. And
I can probably only remember the last one.
Okay,
so.
Let's start with that. What do you think?
Well, so desalination, I think is really important. Again, it gets to the portfolio, right? There are challenges with desalination in that, it can be expensive, it's energy intensive, and you're left with the brine. And you have to figure out what to do with the brine. And the most common practice is to maybe dilute it and throw it back in the ocean, which is not
solution.
Great. So if we can solve any of those, the degree to which we can use renewable energy, it will cut down on the expense. It will cut down on the emissions. Then we need to figure out what to do with the brines. I think it's a solvable problem. I think it's really good for cities, places like Cape Town, cities around the world.
So it's very localized.
Very localized. It's never going to be a solution for agriculture, just because agriculture uses so much water that you'd have to drain the ocean.
Yeah. So you don't see there being a pipeline from San Diego to Phoenix at any point?
A lot of people see that. I personally don't.
Yeah. How about a pipeline from the Great Lakes? They seem to have more water over to Phoenix.
I hesitate to talk about that because every time I talk about it, I get hate mail from the Great Lakes region, and I'm not a supporter.
Yeah.
But even if I say pipeline and Great Lakes in the same sentence, there's a
so that's part of the issue, right? We have world issues, but no matter where you are, it's not in my backyard. We're not part of the solution. Yeah. Although I'm not saying that is a particular solution. That's a Band-Aid on a on a problem that we've created. Last global question. We know Asia. We know that they have rivers, and big portions of Asia are entering into first world from a third world scenario, right? And there's big talk about water wars over the next 20 years. As each country dams up because they want more agriculture, they want to feed more people, they want more meat, which means more crops are raised to feed meat, unless they're using some regenerative farming practices. But what do you foresee? Do you even? I mean, I'm asking very generalist. I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, it's fine.
What do you think? And it may not be
all the time.
professional. It could be what you think on a personal level. But what do you think about what I think are the impending water wars that I think will probably happen right about 20 years from now? And they've already started, right?
Yes, they have already started, and they've been there, throughout human history. A lot of it goes unreported. A lot of it can be very small, but they're getting bigger. And I think even the research that I do that shows the expansion of the drying and the transboundary regions, India, Pakistan, across the Middle East, Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, the water bodies span, or they cross the political boundaries. They don't recognize the political boundaries. And like you've said, you've got upstream countries that want to build a dam and hang on to that water, and then deprive the downstream countries of that water. And so I think it's going to be increasingly more complex, and I think we'll see a lot more conflict over the water, a lot more conflict over water in the next 10 years.
And I'm going to ask a general question. I said I wouldn't ask one global one, but dams in general, right? I mean, we need energy, and the world's going to need much more energy, maybe 40% more than we already have, if we want to bring people up to, first world standards, but also with the population growing the way it's growing. So we need more water, which there's less of. We need more energy, which there's not even enough of right now. What do you think? Hydroelectric's been an answer in the past, but we know that it disrupts the cycle, the natural cycle. Yeah, I don't think you can get a fresh tuna, salmon anymore, certainly not in the Northwest or Alaska, because everything is stopped by dams, and man has tried to do some farming and that kind of thing. But what's your take on that?
Well, again, it's a balance, because we need reservoirs and we need dams for flood control. We need dams to support irrigation, and we need dams for water supply. I think that the challenge today is like, you don't need more dams, and there's probably not enough water to fill them. We need to be thinking about other ways to store water. Could be underground storage in soil and rock units. There's no perfect worlds. We have to find that sustainable balance of doing the things we need to do to grow food and to have water for the environment and water for people and water for economic growth. We need to do it in ways that don't trash the environment. That's the challenge, and it's really hard to get people to think that way.
And so let's move to Arizona.
Let's.
So you're from the East Coast. I'm from the East Coast.
Yeah.
It rains all the time back there. Water is like,
Yeah,
we got
it's a
too much of
rarity
that.
here.
I'd like
Yeah.
to have less when I lived in Buffalo.
Me too.
But here we are in Arizona now. I see it because I'm a landscaper, and I also sell organic soils to farmers. So I see an impact. It's no longer theoretical or in the future anymore. I was just down talking to farmers in Wilcox. The AMA, which is an acronym for a group that monitors water for farmers, has just put an overlay in Wilcox restricting water. I know farmers who we sell to that have been growing alfalfa since the early 50s, 4 generations. They're out of business this year. And a big part is there's water restrictions for both agriculture and now for subdivisions. So agriculture, they're trying to take a crop like alfalfa that was, 8 acre feet a year, saying you can get 2 to grow your product, whatever it may be, but not enough. So we're seeing these kind of restrictions that probably have to be done, but we're seeing a change of life, right? I think there was more agriculture when I got here than there is now, which is crazy. And agriculture uses more water, but there is less water. Population is driving. So we talk about agriculture, eat local, grow local, eat local. You can't eat local if you can't grow anything here. You can't raise animals here. So talk about Arizona. Talk about the challenges we have here. And is there any reason to have optimism over what we're seeing?
Well, Arizona's lost a tremendous amount of water because of climate change and because of overpumping of groundwater, and a lot of it's to produce food. So, the future of Arizona and what we can accomplish with agriculture, what we can accomplish with economic growth, I think will depend a lot on what happens with the Colorado River. So as soon as we get Colorado River cutbacks, there's going to be a lot more pressure on the groundwater. The groundwater is not being replenished. So the bottom line is Arizona is a state that does not have the water that it used to have. And so the choices of how to use that water, whether we use it to grow alfalfa, whether we use it for a data center, whether we want to use it for a golf course, those are difficult choices that you and I are not going to make, but our elected officials are going to make. But the reality of the situation in Arizona today is that we have a lot less water available than we did 10 years ago and 10 years before that.
What happens in the next 10?
Yeah.
I know we're working out on the west side, west of Wickenburg, and I believe, and you probably know the actual names of tables, but I think it's the McMullen.
Yep, been there.
One of the biggest in the country on this side of the Mississippi, right? And from what I understand, that one is going from a big lake or a big ocean, it's turning into more of a river now. And I know the governor, there's one particular grower of alfalfa, and they are basically taking our water and sending it to the Middle East. So they're growing alfalfa, they compact it. There's not a lot of jobs created because agriculture is industrial. There's not a lot of jobs. And so they're pumping in, synthetic fertilizers, and they're weed control, the whole bit. And they're pumping that water out. What's the, and this is more of a political issue, but when you are growing crops that probably don't belong here anymore, when do the politicians step in and say, enough is enough?
Well, I think some of them are doing that now. Certainly Governor Hobbs is doing that, and the Attorney General, Chris Mays, is doing that as well. I think it's, that realization that we can't afford to basically, let a foreign country outsource its water needs to Arizona. And it comes down to the lack of groundwater management that we have across the state. You mentioned the active management areas. They only cover 18% of the state. So one of the things that I really respect about Governor Hobbs is that she's trying to expand that groundwater management. And at the same time, she and the Attorney General are trying to stop their Saudi farms, right? And think about it. It gets back to what I was saying before. We, as a state and as a nation, and especially in the southwestern U.S., where the water stress and the disappearing water is really at a critical point, we have to start prioritizing. And so what are the priorities in this case for Arizona? What are the priorities for the state? Well, the priorities are going to be to take care of Arizonans before.
But do people see it? Do they understand it yet?
No.
What's happening? They will soon, right?
No,
And it's going to be crisis mode when they see it, right?
Well, it is crisis mode already, and it's that the challenge. There's a real challenge in getting the public to understand it and sort of latch on to it. And there's so many reasons for that. We're talking about groundwater, which is underground and kind of a mystery, right? We don't see it, we don't understand it.
And it's been there for 2 million years, created in the ice ages.
It depends. That's right.
I mean,
that's
a lot
right.
of it,
a lot of it's very old, and
So it's not going to, we get a
not
couple
coming
of
back.
good years of rain, it's not going to
Not at all.
replenish itself?
No. We're
Okay.
burning through most of it, in the last century.
Right.
So, it comes down to what are the priorities, state by state in the United States. What are their priorities, and especially in the dry states? So, focus on the Southwest because they're the most challenged. What are their priorities? Is it to grow food? Is it to have more data centers? Is it to increase the population and have more homeowners? That's not for you and I to decide. My job, I think, is to be like the accountant. Is
To
to
tell
say,
them,
like,
hey, look,
here it is.
you ain't
Like,
making
here's
money
the,
anymore,
that's right.
baby.
Here's the
Right.
balance sheet, and this is how much water you have, and so
And it's
don't
not just,
overspend.
it is, you bring up, it's industry that's competing for water. And,
Yeah.
and it's, even though, an acre of urban life doesn't use the same amount as an acre of agriculture, it's not to say that we don't use water. We do. And, I have a landscape company. We started doing native only. We were very involved with North Scottsdale, North Phoenix, Mesa. And I was always an advocate of more of a raw desert look, which I think is beautiful once you get used to it. We come from the East Coast. We're not used to seeing the desert. We want to see lawns and that. And the biggest crop in the U.S. is the lawn, right? And that's not a crop.
grass.
We don't
Right.
eat it. Also, it's chopped every day, so there's no microbiology really forming. So it's really one of the most horrible things we have going on. But if you've got a house, you want to show your elegance by having a crop there, right? We have a subdivision that's over 10,000 acres that we've been worked on over 30 years. This year, the water authorities have come and said, you're using 390 million gallons a year. You need to cut a third of those gallons. So now I think people are going to see it because there's a $200 million landscape that's been put in with more than 10,000 homeowners, and they're going to see the direct impact. First of all, the landscape that's put in is going to have to be trashed and needs to be cut back. They're going to see, and it's a tremendous amount of waste of money, but also the choice of plants that were used. All of the different conditions that are creating that waste. People are going to start seeing it. They're going to start noticing it soon, whether they believe it or not.
Well,
and,
I think,
and it'll be too late, right?
well, I lived in California during some real heavy drought periods, and in the suburbs. And one of the biggest things that happened between 2011 and 2015 around the Los Angeles, I was in Pasadena area, was the disappearance of the lawn. It was like the end of the lawn, and it had.
We all got
So
used to it, though, right?
you get used to it, and there's a human psychology thing I think that's associated with it. I agree. I love a grass backyard and
Sure.
going out there with my dog and letting him roll around and laying
They say
in
it's
the
embedded
sun
in our
and-
DNA because
I
we all
don't
came from
know.
Africa where there was a
Maybe.
savanna and grasslands,
Maybe,
right?
but we can't
Can't do it anymore.
can't have it all.
Yeah. So, okay, the last thing I'm going to ask you about is any particular projects. Right now, you're at ASU. You're about to get butchered by 300 kids in a classroom
I can't
setting.
wait for that. Yeah, I'm stoked.
So you got a lot going on your plate there, and you're involved with a lot of things. What other projects do you get involved with? You were involved with some of the climate organizations. What else do you want to bring up or talk about that people might want to know about?
Well, so we continue to work with satellites and use them and develop methods and develop new ideas for new satellites to track how our water moves over and through the land surface. And the reason why that's important is that the more we can monitor it and track it, the better we can manage it. So that's always fun. We're always trying to do things that are higher resolution, finer granularity in both space and time. And you mentioned the climate work, and so one of the other things that I really sort of aspire to on a more grandiose global scale is really elevating this water discussion that you and I have been having today in these global climate discussions, like the COPs, the Conference of the Parties. We hear about COP28, COP29. This year it's COP30. It's in Brazil. I'm working to elevate the water dialogue to the level of carbon dioxide. So when we're talking about CO2, we're talking about water. It's not just CO2.
It's everything, right?
It's everything. And food is.
Have you met or talked to Dr. Bruno Basso from Michigan?
He's a friend of mine.
So he's doing satellite stuff too, but he's doing it mostly land-based, right?
Yes,
And
he does
farming-based.
aircraft. He's looking at the most productive parts of fields. And yes, Bruno.
And a great guy too. Right?
Awesome guy, former excellent soccer player. Right. We're from the same part of, families from the same part of Italy, from around Naples. And he tried to recruit me to join him at Michigan State, but I came here.
Yeah. Do you drink Italian wines?
I drink all kinds of wines.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yes, and I've had some fine dinners with Bruno.
That's another conversation later where we can
awesome.
we can pick stuff.
And then there's the water use of the wine industry, which is, honestly, they're quite sustainable. I've been to Napa a few times, and the sustainability scene there is incredible.
It's really, We've interviewed with La Crema and the Jackson family with their sustainability people. We did a podcast out there, and we're seeing it. And we've been doing with the landscape company, we've done some local vineyards, and I only do them because I'm experimenting with soils to see what happens. But it's more than soils. Last week we had a podcast with an ASU professor that is talking about crop selection. So if you pick the wrong crop, and that crop is just, you can't get through veraison because of that heat, then you're fighting an uphill battle. So it all comes together, and it is the importance of universities is critical now, and we're seeing cutbacks of universities, cutbacks with the USDA, cutbacks with a lot of different things going on, and the impact is, we don't see it right this minute because we're all so short-term based, but by the time we elect a new president, we will see the effects.
I agree. I think it's hard to message this, but it's our universities that are really the drivers of the economy. That's where we do the research, right? People think that, it happens in the private sector. It doesn't happen in the private sector if no one goes to college.
Well, the private sector reinforces the status quo, because the status quo is the big corporations making money to keep things exactly the way they are, which I can't understand, because money goes to where money goes, right? So the guys who are in industries that are not part of the solution will eventually move their money to industries that will be part of the solution. But it's that zero-sum game, mentality that I think we're fighting overall. But that's as political as we'll get today.
Okay.
Hey, Dr. J. Famiglietti, close enough. Appreciate you being on our podcast today. Another great professor at ASU who, it seems like we're interviewing lots and lots of people there that, make that such a thriving institution as well. So, one last quick question, because I'm getting the hook.
Yeah.
Do you, what documentaries about water are out there?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the ones that I've been in. And so there's my favorite called Last Call at the Oasis, which was produced by Participant Media. Excellent film, produced by and directed by an Academy Award winner, Jessica Yu. There's another one called Day Zero, which was really, really good, and it's a little bit about Day Zero in South Africa, but really sort of looks around the world. So those are two of my favorites.
So we are putting on an environmental documentary film festival, and we're kind of tied in with ASU a little. We're going to use, I think, that venue. We're in Tempe, Mesa, and here, and we've got to select the final, because we're going to keep it pretty, pretty exclusive to the big films. Yeah, and then I think we'll have lots of smaller, short stuff. But I love to have the water discussion be included. I'm going to have a lot of soil discussions and things.
We have to have that. So I'm so glad you brought this up. So would love to chat with you about that and share some titles of some films, and would love to actually be here and help I can't pass up the opportunity to raise public awareness around waters.
And
Love to support it.
what's great is that this is an Arizona Film Festival. So even though we're talking about some things that are statewide or nationwide or worldwide, I like the idea of there being some representative filmmakers that are either based here or people that are in your position that can kind of narrate or talk us through some of the things and the impact here too locally, because locally we do need that's I think where the solutions come from. We all start in doing farming or backyard farming or conserving, getting rid of our yards and that kind of thing. And so having that local film festival, I think, is going to be, a big. Not sure where else in the world I haven't done enough research to see where they're doing it, but if there's a need for having an environmental film festival, certainly a place like Arizona where we have a drought, where we have a decline in agriculture and all the issues we have, this is a great place to get started with this thing. So again, thank you for being a guest here today. I'm sure we'll be in touch with you more. Sounds like we got a lot of alignment on a lot of things, and appreciate you being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, you bet. Take care. If you like this episode, please like us and also subscribe to Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Thanks for your time again. Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.